hello, and welcome to the Daily Scripture Podcast. My name is Jerome Lavelle, and I hope that you are having a wonderful day today. Today, we will be looking at 2 Kings, chapter 5, verses 1 through 15. Naaman, the army commander of the king of Aram, was highly esteemed and respected by his master. For through him the Lord had brought victory to Aram. But valiant as he was, the man was a leper. Now the Arameans had captured in a raid on the land of Israel a little girl who became the servant of Naaman's wife. "If only my master would present himself to the prophet in Samaria," she said to her mistress, "he would cure him of his leprosy." Naaman went and told his lord just what the slave girl from the land of Israel had said. "Go," said the king of Aram, "I will send along a letter to the king of Israel." So Naaman set out, taking along 10 silver talents, 6,000 gold pieces, and 10 festal garments. To the king of Israel he brought the letter, which read, "With this letter I am sending my servant Naaman to you, that you may cure him of leprosy." When he read the letter, the king of Israel tore his garments and exclaimed, "Am I a God with power over life and death, that this man should send someone to me to be cured of leprosy? Take note, you can see he is only looking for a quarrel with me." When Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his garments, he sent word to the king, "Why have you torn your garments? Let him come to me and find out that there is a prophet in Israel." Naaman came with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. The prophet sent him a messenger, "Go and wash 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be healed, and you will be clean." But Naaman went away angry, saying, "I thought that he would surely come out and stand there to invoke the Lord his God, and would move his hand over the spot and thus cure the leprosy. Are not the rivers of Damascus, the Abana and Pharpar, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be cleansed?" With this he turned about in anger and left. But his servants came up and reasoned with him. "My father," they said, "if the prophet had told you to do something extraordinary, would you not have done it? All the more now, since he said to you, 'Wash and be clean,' should you do as he said." So Naaman went down and plunged into the Jordan 7 times at the word of the man of God. His flesh became like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. He returned with his whole retinue to the man of God. On his arrival he stood before him and said, "Now I know that there is no God in all the earth except in Israel." Today in 2 Kings chapter 5 verses 1 through 15, we hear the story of the healing of Naaman. As the story picks up, we see Naaman, a Syrian Gentile, a highly respected army commander, a valiant man who was afflicted with tzarat, the Hebrew word translated as leprosy. At the encouragement of the Israelite slave girl of Naaman's wife, he seeks healing by the prophet in Samaria. And so with a letter in tow from his king to the king of Israel, off he went, not delivering some news of trade or a war declaration or as an diplomatic envoy between the kings, but at the suggestion of the unnamed Israelite slave girl who was captured in serving Naaman's wife. If you think about it, the entire premise of this trip is quite extraordinary. And that is what I would like to focus on in my reflection, the action of that unnamed slave girl. Not knowing the context of the manner of general treatment of Israelite slaves by the Syrians in those days, she was nonetheless a slave. Thus, implying a certain standing and situation, such as being held against her will and serving at the pleasure of Naaman's wife in any number of tasks. And thus, by nature of being a slave, there is an assumed hierarchical relationship at play. And yet, despite her situation, her thoughts, her priority, her heart was on helping one of her captors. The scripture says, "If only my master would present himself to the prophet in Samaria," she said to her mistress, "he would cure him of his leprosy." In today's world, especially in Western cultures, children are often afforded a voice in family conversations. But this may not have been the case for this slave girl as a child in her time, especially considering the cultural context and her status as a slave. The very act of her heartfelt suggestion might have constituted a great bravery on her part, and despite any such barriers where it would have been easier and perhaps safer for her to remain silent, she spoke. And so my first reflection today is the lesson of bravery, of seeing a wrong or an opportunity, and despite the conditions of the situation, of placing trust in God and acting in bravery. My second observation follows from the first, and that is the incredible, unforeseen, unanticipated outcomes that can result when we do the first. In this case, her suggestion led Naaman to the prophet Elisha, who provided what seems to be a nonsensical remedy to Naaman. Remember, he told Naaman to 7 times plunge into the river Jordan. This suggestion led Naaman to ultimately reflect on his condition, and with perhaps a little bit of a "what have I got to lose?" or a "I'll do this and show that prophet he's crazy" attitude, in he goes 7 times, which then leads to his complete healing. The scripture says his flesh became like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean, which upon his introspection and reflection led to his belief in the one true God. He says, "Now I know there is no God in all earth except in Israel." Thus, my second reflection is that when we start the ball rolling, as the slave girl did in her bravery, we should never be surprised with what God will do with that act. So my takeaway today is to acknowledge that God may not be asking me to heal and convert the Naamans in my life. He may not be asking me to do extraordinary things. Rather, he may be asking me to do ordinary things in extraordinary ways. He may be asking me to be the slave girl of Naaman's wife and to just get the ball rolling. Thank you for joining the Daily Scripture Podcast. My name is Jerome Lavelle, and remember, our thoughts of the day are bravery in action and getting the ball rolling for God. Well, until next time, be well and be blessed.